So, where do we start with the physical audit process? I think this is a subset of the previous video. So you've done your verification process to actually qualify the data that's actually in any sort of HAM or SAM system that you might have in your IT estate. And you want to get to the high-hanging fruit then at that point. So there's stuff that you periodically want to sample to put your hands on, or to at least witness to say, yes, it is where we believe it to be. And again, depending on some of the ranges of inventory tools that actually report data, to pin it down to a specific geography.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because the physical audit process is the traditional way that organisations have ensured that their asset register is correct. And it's not just an IT thing by any stretch. I used to work as a checkout operator in my local supermarket, and once every 6 months we would get an extra number of hours in order to do a physical audit of all of the stock. We did a stock take of the entire supermarket, and the physical audit process is effectively a stock take of your hardware assets. The thing about this process is it's horrendously expensive, particularly finding the long tail of assets that are just really, really difficult to pin down. What you're doing in this process is taking your asset register, so everything that is owned by your organisation as evidenced by your asset register, and physically citing it so that you know exactly where it is at that particular moment in time. And the benefits of that, particularly doing it across your entire estate, to be honest, are probably questionable.
I think it varies from organisation to organisation. There's one particular university I dealt with, and physically knowing where the devices were per classroom was really quite advantageous to them, because they weren't getting that information from the scan that they were doing on an automated basis. So sure enough, we were up at 7 o'clock one morning, photographing doors, and then photographing the systems. And that's the quickest way, rather than scribbling it down in an Excel spreadsheet. And we literally just photographed them, and then photographed the next door, and then we knew that was the break between all the doors, the classrooms that we'd audited.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. So it was a nice shortcut there. When I've done a physical audit, we've had asset tags that could be scanned, and a scanner, and I had to go around and scan every single asset tag. And then this particular company wanted to pin the assets down to a particular desk. So some sites would actually have a code to be scanned on the desk so that I could scan the desk as well, and then other sites didn't, and we had to actually type in a number. And again, sometimes I just had to question, particularly in an age of laptops, and equipment now is not actually that expensive to replace. Is that a useful use of my time, of resource time? It's very expensive. But that company used to have a goal of doing a physical touch audit, or identifying 99% of assets across every single site. And you know what? They did it.
Well, and was that just IT assets as well, or was it other assets?
No, it was our IT equipment. Right. Yeah. Anything that was asset tagged, we had to find 99% of it across the site. But you know what? That was a relatively small company. Mm-hmm. And as they grew, and I suspect also there were finance companies, and when the crash came, I wonder if they still do that.
Yeah.
Because it's so expensive. So the other approach to doing a physical audit is to randomly select perhaps 10% of your assets a month, or even 1% if you're very large, 1% of your assets a month. Randomly select them from your asset register and go and find those assets. So that's giving you a sample to tell you how accurate your asset register is, without actually going and touching every single piece of equipment in your organisation. So that's the other option that you should consider if you want to do some sort of physical audit. The other thing that you can do is, again, do physical audits focused on assets which are at a stage of their life cycle where they're not on the network. So you could in fact have a policy that says, as long as we can see assets on the network, we're not going to worry about physically auditing them, but we are going to audit our stock rooms every week or every month. to make sure that what is in the stockrooms should be there. What should be in the stockrooms is actually there.
Yeah, and the other thing to consider as well, of course, is the relative value and risk of the assets that you want to go and physically audit as well. Nobody's bothered about, keyboards and mice and that kind of thing. It's just life's too short. So, but yeah, laptops, mobile phones, iPads, touchpads, whatever you want to call them. Those valuable and attractive things, as we used to call them in the Navy, that, are quite easy to pop in somebody's bag and never be seen again. Yeah, let's sort of, have a check-in of those now and again. They could be worth sort of tracking down.
Yeah, so it's really all about policy. So there's a couple of elements of your policy here. What is it that you're going to physically audit? Is it okay just to see it on the network, or do you want to actually physically touch it? And if you are going to do a sample audit, then what are the parameters around that? Are you going to sample 1% per month, 10% per month? What's reasonable for you? And then finally, what target is it that you want to achieve? I mean, achieving 100% of assets located is potentially very difficult. Do you want to set a target of 99%, 90%? Again, think it through and think about what works for your organisation. The other scenario where you might do a full physical audit and literally go and touch every machine is actually if you're selling a company or purchasing a company, and you need to actually go and put a new build on machines, or need to actually identify which machines are going to be transferred and sold as part of the transaction. So I have seen full physical touch audits to put a new asset tag on physical equipment, to put a new discovery tool on physical equipment, for instance, as part of an M&A process.
Just on that point too, of course, you need to make sure that your policy has gone sufficiently high in the organisation so that when the M&A activity comes to fruition and you have to execute on that, you've got sufficient lead time to scope out accurately and fully the range of IT assets that you have to account for, be them being sold off or being sort of brought into the company.
Yeah, M&A gets really tricky.
Yeah,
because there's so many commercial sensitivities around it, that it can be really difficult to know what you can do when, and often you feel like you're just blind.
Yeah.
You're wearing a blindfold, and but you still have to somehow figure it out.
Well, it's that thing too. You could be operating under some sort of confidentiality agreement that you're not actually letting on what you're doing because the sale hasn't been formally announced.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and of course, if you're touching until the sale is completed and you're doing a physical audit of another entity's equipment, that's got its own issues as well. So there needs to be this cooperation between two entities that are still officially separate. So yeah, it can be all fun and games.
All the joys.
Absolutely. So yeah.
Well, again, I think we've fairly exhausted that one. So I hope you enjoyed it. One final video to go. Hurrah!
We're nearly there.
And we will see you next month. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.